All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're digging into the absolutely brilliant mind of Thomas Aquinas and his massive, monumental project, building a bridge between the world of philosophy and the world of theology. You see, back in the 13th century, this was a huge deal. He set out to take one of the greatest thinkers in all of history and make his ideas work for the Christian faith.
So put yourself in the shoes of an intellectual back in the 1200s. The writings of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle have just been rediscovered in Europe, and it's like a bomb went off in the world of ideas. I mean, his logic is just so powerful, his observations so sharp, but there's one big problem. He was a pagan. So how on earth could his view of the universe line up with the personal creator God of Christianity? That was the question of the day.
Okay, so let's break this down. On one side, you have these interpretations of Aristotle that just flat out contradicted some core Christian beliefs. No way around it. But on the other side, you have Thomas Aquinas, who looks at this whole situation and sees a massive opportunity. His goal wasn't to throw Aristotle out. No, it was to harness that incredibly powerful system of logic, to tweak it, to adapt it, and to turn it into a tool that could actually explain and support Christian theology. He was, in a word, the great synthesizer.
So, how do you do it? How do you give a pagan philosopher a Christian makeover? Well, that brings us to our first section. Aquinas' strategy was just brilliant. It was all about adaptation, not rejection.
At the absolute heart of his entire project is this one core principle. For Aquinas, reason and revelation, what you can figure out with your brain and what God reveals through faith, they aren't enemies, not at all. They're two different paths that lead to the very same truth. He completely rejected the idea that something could be true in philosophy, but, false in theology. For him, they had to work together.
Okay, so if reason is a perfectly good tool, how does Aquinas use it to prove God exists? Well, being the incredibly methodical thinker he was, he doesn't just jump in. First, he has to clear the ground a bit and tell us which kinds of arguments are, in his view, just total dead ends.
And to get what he's doing, you really have to know these two terms. A priori arguments are based on pure logic, totally independent of the world around you. Think of it like a math proof you do just in your head. On the other hand, a posteriori arguments start with evidence, with things we can see and touch. They're all about working backward, kind of like a detective, arguing from an effect you can see to the cause that must have made it happen.
And Aquinas, as a good student of Aristotle, firmly rejects that whole a priori path. He just sets it aside. So that Platonic idea that we're all born with some kind of knowledge of God? Nope. Anselm's famous ontological argument, the idea you can basically define God into existence, he's not buying it. He even sidesteps Augustine's beautiful argument from truth. Why? Because, for Aquinas, all of these arguments start in the wrong place.
And here's the really fascinating part. It's the reason why he rejects them. In his own words, he says, look, the idea God exists might be self-evident to God, sure, but it's not self-evident to us. Why not? Because we don't have a backstage pass to God's essence. We're human. We have to start with what we can know, with what our senses tell us about the world right in front of us.
So, the path forward for Aquinas is crystal clear. He's not going to argue from abstract ideas alone. No, he's taken the a posteriori highway. He's going to start from the effects we see all around us in the created world and reason his way back to their ultimate cause.
And this, of course, brings us to maybe the most famous part of his entire work, the 5 ways, his 5 proofs for God's existence. But there is a huge, massive catch here that people often miss. These proofs are not some kind of neutral, universal logic. They're built on a very specific philosophical foundation.
And that foundation? It's pure Aristotle. I mean, just look at this list. Motion is moving from potential to actual, efficient causes, final causes. This is the philosophical toolkit that Aquinas is borrowing directly from the Greek master himself. These are the building blocks, his starting assumptions.
And this point is absolutely critical to understanding the 5 ways. They're what you might call system-dependent. For these arguments to even make sense, let alone be convincing, you kind of have to buy into Aristotle's whole way of seeing reality first. Aquinas isn't just arguing into the void, he's building his case using what he saw as the most solid philosophical system of his time.
Okay, so Aquinas is using Aristotelian parts. Logically, you'd think he's going to build an Aristotelian God, right? But this is where his real genius kicks in. He takes us down a path that starts with Aristotle, but, oh man, it ends up somewhere completely different. What happens next is just a remarkable transformation.
So, let's be super clear. The starting points for his arguments, the tools in his box, they are all straight from the pagan philosopher. But the destination, the conclusion he reaches, it is fundamentally different. The God he argues for is not Aristotle's distant, self-absorbed God who only thinks about thinking. It's a God who creates, who knows, and who directs the entire universe. A God that sounds a heck of a lot more like the God of the Christian faith.
And this chart just lays the switch out perfectly. Aristotle's prime mover is a passive final cause. It moves the world kind of like the idea of winning a race inspires an athlete to run. It doesn't actually do anything. Aquinas transforms this into a first efficient cause, an active agent who is kicking off motion and is the source of all existence. He goes from a God who only thinks about himself to an all-knowing creator. It's a total game changer.
It's also so important to clarify what he means by first cause. It's not like the first domino in a long line that gets flicked and then its job is done. No. Aquinas is arguing for what you might call a meta-cause, a God who is holding the entire chain of existence up right here, right now, at every single moment. Without that constant sustaining cause, the whole show would just wink out of existence.
So, Aquinas has used reason to argue for the existence of this creator God. But that just raises another huge question. What can we actually know about the nature of this God? And this presents a whole new philosophical puzzle.
The problem is that God is sui generis, a fancy Latin term that just means in a class by himself, unique, one of a kind. Think about it. We understand what treeness is because we've seen a bunch of different trees. We can compare them and find what they have in common. But there's only one God. You can't observe a species of gods to figure out their essence, so our normal way of knowing things just breaks down.
Aquinas' solution is just brilliant. It's knowledge by analogy. We start with the world again. We look around and we see qualities like goodness and truth and existence. And we see them in different degrees, right? Some things are better than others. Some statements are truer than others. From all these finite, imperfect examples, he says, we can reason our way up to an infinite and perfect source. Therefore, God must be goodness itself, truth itself, and being itself.
And the grand takeaway is this. For Aquinas, God is the ultimate source and the ultimate standard for everything that is. Every good thing, every true thing, every existing thing gets its goodness, truth, and existence from God. They all point back to Him who is the perfection of it all. In his view, all truth is ultimately God's truth.
So in the end, Aquinas accomplished this masterful synthesis. He built this incredibly strong intellectual bridge connecting the God of faith with the God of the philosophers, and he used the strongest material he had at the time, Aristotelian philosophy. Which leaves us with a big question to think about. In our modern world, a world that doesn't really share a lot of Aristotle's basic assumptions anymore, does that bridge still stand?